"Sweetheart, you okay over here all by yourself?" The voice drifted softly through the crisp autumn air. Maya Williams leaned forward, her hands resting on her knees, her dark eyes filled with quiet warmth as she spoke to the little girl sitting alone on the old wooden bench beneath the maple tree. The girl didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the playground ahead, where other children shouted, chased each other, and leaped over piles of fallen leaves. The laughter seemed to come from a world far away, a world she used to belong to. Her name was Lily, 5 years old. She wore a pale yellow dress that fluttered slightly in the breeze, and one silver sneaker caught the sunlight. Her other leg ended in a polished prosthetic, smooth and still. Her fingers clutched a one-legged doll, its worn cloth body pressed tightly against her heart. Maya followed the girl's gaze, her heart tightening. She knew that look too well, longing mixed with quiet acceptance. The look of someone watching life from the sidelines. Maya's voice lowered as she shifted her weight. "My name's Maya. That's my boy, Ethan, over there on the monkey bars. He's a chatterbox, but a good kid." She smiled, trying to keep her tone light. "He usually doesn't leave anyone sitting alone." The girl's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Maya smiled softly and sat on the far end of the bench, leaving a respectful gap. She pulled out a small sketchbook and a handful of colored pencils. "You like to draw?" The little girl hesitated, then gave the tiniest nod. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lily," she whispered. "That's a pretty name," Maya said. "It suits you." Lily's small shoulders rose and fell. "My mom used to say that." Before she could say more, Ethan came charging over, waving a stick like a sword. "Mom, you should have seen me climb. I almost touched the sky." Then his eyes landed on Lily. "Hey, your doll's got a robot leg. That's so cool." Lily flinched. Her head dropped instantly. "Ethan," Maya said sharply. "That's not..." But her son, innocent and bubbling with curiosity, kept talking. "My mom draws superheroes. She could draw your doll as a superhero with jet legs." Lily's tiny shoulders stiffened. Her fingers trembled around her doll. Maya reached out quickly. "Honey, I'm sorry, he didn't mean anything bad." That's when a deep, furious voice cut through the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Maya turned to find a man walking briskly toward them. He wore tailored slacks and a navy wool coat that looked out of place in a park full of sweatshirts and sneakers. His silver watch gleamed under his coat sleeve. A Bluetooth earpiece still blinked blue on his ear, though it was clear his focus was entirely on the bench. Richard Evans, the billionaire tech entrepreneur every magazine called the man who built the future, was glaring down at Maya like she was something he needed to crush. "Sir," Maya began. He straightened and faced Maya, eyes sharp as glass. "I don't know what you were doing here, but my daughter doesn't need to be the subject of anyone's pity or curiosity." "Daddy, stop." Maya stood her ground, though her heart had tightened. She knew that look. She'd seen it her entire life. Assumptions dressed in tailored suits. "I wasn't doing anything except talking to your daughter," she said evenly. "Ethan made a comment about her doll, and I apologized when I saw it upset her." Richard's jaw twitched. Children don't say those things without learning them somewhere. Maya's expression stiffened. "Right, because a black mother must be raising a cruel child." The words hit like a whip. A few onlookers nearby, parents with strollers and coffee cups, paused. Some smirked, whispering under their breath. One woman murmured, "Serves her right," while another chuckled quietly, shaking her head. Maya felt their eyes burning holes in her back. Her cheeks flushed with humiliation, but her voice didn't waver. "I wasn't mocking your daughter," she said slowly, "and you might want to choose your words before your daughter hears them." Richard stepped closer, his tone colder. "Don't tell me how to speak to my child." "No." "Then maybe speak like a father, not a judge," Maya said quietly. For a moment, the two stood locked in silence, the space between them electric. Ethan clung to his mother's hand, frightened. Lily sat frozen, tears beginning to spill. Then crack. A sharp sound split the air. Everyone's head turned. Up above, one of the maple tree's largest branches, old and heavy with rot, snapped free from the trunk. It creaked for a heartbeat, then crashed downward straight toward the bench. "Lily!" Richard shouted, but before he could move, Maya was already running. Without hesitation, she lunged forward, sweeping the little girl into her arms. The world blurred into motion, the rush of air, the screech of breaking wood, and then the heavy branch slammed down. A dull thud echoed through the park. When the dust settled, Maya was sprawled on the ground beside the bench, shielding Lily beneath her. The branch had grazed her shoulder, slicing her skin. Blood soaked the sleeve of her denim jacket and trickled down her arm. "Maya!" Ethan screamed. Lily looked up, trembling in her embrace. You saved me." Maya smiled faintly, though her vision was beginning to blur. "Guess we both got lucky today, huh? If this moment touched you, hit like and comment where you're watching from. Maybe someone nearby is watching too." Richard froze, his breath caught in his throat. The world seemed to narrow until there was only the sight of Maya, this woman he had just humiliated, lying there bleeding because she had protected his daughter. He knelt beside them, voice unsteady. "Oh God, are you hurt? Maya tried to sit up, wincing. "Just a scratch," she murmured, though the blood said otherwise. Richard swallowed hard. The words came out barely audible. "I'm sorry, I didn't." Richard's throat tightened. He reached for his daughter, pulling Lily into his arms. But his eyes stayed on Maya, on the red stain spreading across her sleeve, on the calm strength in her face despite the pain. Around them, the same people who had snickered moments ago now stared in stunned silence. One woman dropped her phone. Another whispered, "She saved the child." Richard's voice cracked. "Someone call an ambulance." Maya blinked, fighting the haze. She felt Ethan's small hands clutching hers, his voice trembling. "Mom, please stay awake." Her vision blurred at the edges. She could still hear Lily sobbing softly in her father's arms, could still taste the copper of blood in her mouth. As darkness began to edge her sight, Maya thought she heard Richard's voice again, no longer cold, but breaking. "Please, stay with us." And as the sirens began to wail in the distance, one truth settled deep in his heart. The woman he had condemned had just shown him the kind of grace money could never buy. The moment the paramedics had arrived, he'd insisted they take Maya there immediately. Not to the city hospital with the press and cameras, not with the risk of his shame becoming front-page fodder. He wanted her safe, quiet, away from flashing lights. Maya sat upright on the padded table, her jacket removed, a nurse gently cleaning the cut across her shoulder. Blood had dried in streaks down her arm, now mixing with disinfectant. Her face was pale, but calm. Ethan stood beside her, his small hand clinging to hers like a lifeline. Richard leaned against the far wall, arms crossed over his chest, but his posture didn't carry the arrogance it had in the park. Now, he looked like a man balancing between shame and disbelief. Lily sat in a chair beside him, swinging her legs, her doll still clutched tightly in her lap. The nurse finished wrapping the gauze and gave Maya a warm smile. "You'll be sore for a few days, but it's nothing broken. You're lucky." Maya gave a short nod. "Not lucky, just fast." "She's a hero," Lily said softly. Ethan beamed. "My mom's always fast." Richard cleared his throat. "Could I speak to you alone?" Maya arched an eyebrow. "Alone? In front of my 6-year-old son who just saw his mom get tackled by a tree branch?" Richard winced. "Of course. I didn't mean to." Maya raised her hand, her voice even. "Let's just get this straight. I'm not looking for gratitude or apologies wrapped in silk. I did what any decent human being would do. I'm not sure everyone would have jumped in front of a falling tree for someone else's child," Richard said. "That says more about everyone than it does about me," she replied. She glanced down at Ethan and squeezed his hand. "But if you have something real to say, go ahead." Richard walked a little closer, careful to keep his voice low. "You were right. I judged you. I assumed things that had no basis. And I said things, harsh things, things I can't take back." "You're right," Maya said simply. "You can't." He exhaled. "I thought you were mocking Lily. I've dealt with too many people who treat her like a sideshow, whispering, pointing, even adults stare. I've spent years building walls to keep her safe." "Walls?" Maya said, her voice tightening. "Or cages?" The words hit him like a slap, quiet but deliberate. He looked at Lily. The little girl was showing Ethan how her doll's robot leg worked, her voice brighter now than it had been in days. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said finally. "I was wrong." Maya nodded. "You were. But you still brought me here. You stayed. That counts for something." There was a long silence between them, filled with unspoken truths. Then Richard broke it. "My name's Richard Evans. You probably know who I am." "I don't care who you are," Maya said, not unkindly. "I care about who you choose to be next." That silenced him. A nurse peeked in and informed Maya she was free to leave whenever she felt ready. She stood carefully, rolling her shoulder. Ethan helped her with her bag, and Lily came forward shyly. "Will you come back to the park?" Lily asked. Maya looked at her, and something soft bloomed behind her tired eyes. "If your daddy promises not to yell at me again." "I won't," Richard said quickly, earning a tiny grin from his daughter. "Then I'll think about it," Maya said. They walked out into the evening air. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. The street was quiet, the small town hum of Connecticut life, settling down for dinner. Richard followed them to the parking lot. "Can I offer you a ride? I have a car waiting." Maya laughed gently. "Unless your driver has a booster seat and fruit snacks, we're good." Ethan waved at Lily. "See you at the park?" "Tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, tomorrow sounds good." Richard watched them walk toward a dusty blue sedan parked at the far end of the lot. Maya's steps were a little slower, her shoulder aching, but her back remained straight, strong, grounded. He stood there long after they drove away, his own driver waiting silently behind the wheel. The image of Maya shielding Lily beneath that broken tree limb played over and over in his mind. Not just the act itself, but the expression on her face. Not fear, not hesitation, conviction. Later that night, long after Lily had fallen asleep, Richard sat in his study, staring at the security footage his assistant had retrieved from the park's public cameras. He watched the moment frame by frame, Ethan pointing at the doll, Maya kneeling, calming her son, and then him, storming in, loud, accusing. His gut twisted. He paused the footage on the frame where Maya was holding Lily, shielding her as the branch fell. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her arms curved around the small body protectively. She had leaned into the danger. Richard leaned back in his chair and whispered to himself, "God, what did I do?" His eyes flicked to a photo on his desk, a framed picture of his late wife holding Lily as a baby, both of them laughing in a way he hadn't heard in years. She would have told him to open his heart. She always had. He reached for his phone and stared at the empty screen. No number to dial, no words to say, not yet. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would see her tomorrow. But tonight, the echo of his own cruelty wouldn't let him rest. The next morning arrived cloaked in a soft mist, the kind that settled gently over the sleepy Connecticut town like a memory refusing to fade. Maya stood by her small kitchen window, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug filled with half-warm coffee. Her shoulder still ached, stiff beneath the gauze, but it wasn't the pain that kept her awake most of the night. It was the moment, the look in Richard Evans's eyes after the branch had fallen. Regret, real regret. She didn't expect that from a man like him. "Mama, can I wear my red sneakers?" Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts as he stood in the hallway, holding one shoe in each hand. "Sure," she said absently, sipping her coffee. "The ones with the rocket boosters, right?" Ethan grinned. "They don't really boost, but Lily likes them." At the sound of her name, Maya turned. "You really liked playing with her, didn't you?" Ethan nodded. "She's quiet, but she listens. Not like Josh from school who just talks about Minecraft all day." Maya chuckled softly. "Well, Lily's special. And she's been through a lot." "Like you?" Ethan asked, his voice small but curious. Maya paused. Children had a way of cutting through the noise. She nodded. "Yeah, like me." "No." They left the apartment shortly after, Maya carrying her sketchpad and a light scarf around her shoulders, hiding the bandage. Ethan skipped ahead, humming a song he made up on the spot. At the park, the playground was already dotted with families. Children raced across the jungle gym, a golden retriever barked at a thrown tennis ball, and a young couple shared a blanket on the grass. Maya scanned the area. Her eyes instinctively found the bench beneath the maple tree empty. "Maybe she's not coming today," Ethan said, disappointed. Maya smiled. "Let's give it a minute." They sat down, and Maya flipped open her sketchpad. She began tracing a light outline of a girl with a cape, and a prosthetic leg flying over a city skyline. It was for Lily, though she hadn't asked for it. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Still no sign of Richard or Lily. Maya felt a strange tightness creep into her chest, not quite worry, but something close to it. Then, just as she was about to close the sketchbook, she heard the crunch of gravel. Lily's small frame came into view first, walking carefully across the path. She wore a sky-blue dress and her blonde hair was tied in a ponytail. The doll with the missing leg peeked from her backpack. Behind her, Richard followed slower, deliberate, holding a to-go tray with 3 drinks. Maya stood. Ethan ran ahead to greet Lily, already chattering about squirrels and rocket shoes. Richard approached the bench, stopping just short of her. "I wasn't sure if you'd actually come back," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure either," Maya replied, her tone unreadable. He held out one of the drinks. "Coffee. Black. I asked the woman at the cart to guess what kind you'd like. She said black." Maya accepted it with a small nod, more amused by his awkwardness than impressed by the gesture. "You're lucky she guessed right." They sat down, Maya on one end, Richard on the other. The children played close by, drawing in the dirt with sticks. For a while, they said nothing. The breeze rustled the trees. A father nearby taught his son how to throw a baseball. A girl in a wheelchair spun in slow circles, her friends pushing her with laughter. "I watched the footage last night," Richard said finally. "The park has public security cameras. I had my assistant pull it." Maya glanced at him. "You had me surveilled?" "I was trying to understand what I missed," he admitted. "And what I saw wasn't just a woman protecting my daughter. It was a mother protecting a child. Any child. No hesitation. No agenda." Maya looked down at her coffee. "I didn't need cameras to know what I was doing," Richard exhaled. "I wanted to thank you again. Not just for what you did, but for coming back. Most people would have walked away and never looked back." "Yeah," Maya said, her voice softer now. "But I'm not most people." He smiled faintly. "That's becoming very clear. Now." Silence settled between them again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't full of judgment or discomfort. It was just space shared and slowly expanding. "I wasn't always this guarded," Richard said. "When my wife died, I thought I could handle the grief. But Lily, she shut down. I couldn't reach her. I tried everything. Doctors, therapists, special schools." Maya didn't interrupt. She listened. "And people, they look at her like she's broken. They don't say it, but they think it. So I made sure no one got close enough to hurt her again." Maya looked out at Lily, who was now laughing at something Ethan said. "She's not broken," she said gently. "She just needed someone to see her." Richard followed her gaze, eyes softening. "You saw her." "I've been her," Maya replied. He turned to her. "What happened to you?" Maya took a long breath. "When I was 12, I was the only black kid at a school where no one looked like me. One day, a teacher accused me of stealing a calculator. No proof, just assumed. My mother came to school wearing her nursing scrubs, exhausted from a double shift. She looked that teacher in the eye and said, 'You don't get to shrink my daughter.'" Richard stared at her, silent. "I learned from her," Maya continued. "You stand tall even when the world tells you to crouch." He nodded slowly. "I think Lily needs someone like you around." Maya met his gaze. "She already has someone. She has you." Richard looked away, swallowing hard. "I haven't been enough. You've been what you knew how to be. Maybe now it's time to learn something new." They sat in silence again, but this time, it was warm, comfortable. Lily came running over, holding up a drawing Ethan had made. "Look, it's me with fire shoes and a flying cape." Maya smiled. "That's exactly how I pictured you." Richard watched the way Lily leaned into Maya, unafraid, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something shift inside him. Something unguarded, something hopeful. As the sun began to climb higher, and the laughter of children rose with it, Richard knew one thing for certain yesterday. He had judged the wrong person. And today, he was learning how to start again. Maya stood in front of the mirror that evening, gingerly peeling off the bandage on her shoulder. The cut was clean, healing well, but the bruise that bloomed around it reminded her of how close she'd come to something far worse. She turned slightly, wincing, then exhaled. It would fade like most things. But the moment, that wouldn't. She thought of Lily's eyes, wide with fear, her tiny body trembling under Maya's arms. She remembered the weight of the tree limb, the rush of adrenaline, the clarity of instinct, and Richard Evans, his fury, his shame, and the sudden stillness in his face when he saw her bleeding. "Mama," Ethan's voice echoed from the next room, muffled under the sound of cartoons. "You think Mr. Lily's dad is going to yell at you again?" Maya smiled despite herself. "I hope not, baby. He looked different today," Ethan continued, crawling up beside her on the couch with his sketchbook. "Like, not mean." She tousled his hair. "Maybe people can surprise you." The next day, the park felt more familiar than it had in years. There was a comfort in the soft shuffle of feet on gravel, the scent of pine bark mulch near the swings, the crispness of fall brushing through her scarf. Maya arrived a little early, choosing a spot under the second maple tree near the sandbox. Ethan kicked off his sneakers and immediately joined a group of kids digging a hole to the dinosaur world. She pulled out her sketch pad and opened to the drawing she'd started for Lily. The girl with a prosthetic leg stood tall in her cape, standing atop a rooftop, wind rushing through her hair, looking not just strong but radiant. A few minutes later, Lily arrived. This time, she wasn't holding her father's hand. She walked on her own, confidently, a little bounce in her step. She was wearing jeans with rainbow patches on the knees and a hoodie with glittery stars. Her doll peeked from her backpack like a travel companion. "Hey," she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Maya smiled. "Hey yourself, I saved you a spot." Lily sat down and unzipped her pack. "I brought my colors today," she said, pulling out a tin of crayons. "I want to help." Together, they worked in silence, at first shading the superhero's hair, outlining the fire jets on her boots, coloring in the skyline behind her. Then Lily said, "He made pancakes this morning." Maya glanced up. "Your dad?" She nodded. "He never makes pancakes. He always says it's messy. But this morning he said, messy's okay." Maya's smile grew slowly like sunrise. "That's a big change. He asked me if I wanted to come today. He didn't make me. I said yes." "That's an even bigger change." They shared a quiet laugh. Lily's hands moved carefully, coloring within the lines. Maya noticed how focused she was, how calm. From across the playground, Richard stood by the coffee cart. He was dressed more casually today. No coat, no tie, just a sweater and jeans. He waved when he caught Maya's eye, and she gave a polite nod in return. A woman nearby leaned toward her companion. "That's Richard Evans. Isn't that the girl with the leg?" The other woman nodded. "And that's the one who jumped in front of the tree. I saw it on Facebook. She's the one who saved her." Doesn't look like someone he'd usually talk to," the first woman muttered. Maya didn't turn, didn't react. She'd heard worse. And better. Soon, Richard crossed the playground with 2 cups of hot cider. He handed one to Maya. "Apple. The cart guy said it's the best in town." She accepted it. "You trusting strangers now?" "Trying," he said, "trying something new." He sat on the edge of the bench beside them, keeping his distance but leaning forward to watch Lily's drawing. "Is that her?" he asked. Lily grinned. "She's flying. She's saving the city. You should put a dog in the sky," Ethan said, plopping down beside them, "like a flying puppy." "I'm on it," Lily said, already grabbing a brown crayon. Maya chuckled. "We're building a whole universe here." Richard watched her for a moment. "You're good with them. Kids don't judge. They just feel," she replied. "I've always liked that about them." He nodded slowly. "I've been trying to control everything around Lily, thinking if I planned it right, shielded her hard enough, I could stop the world from hurting her. She's already been hurt," Maya said gently. "And yet here she is, laughing, creating, healing." Richard's voice dropped. "I wasn't healing. I was just surviving." Maya looked at him, really looked. The weight under his eyes, the slight tremble in his fingers when he brushed a leaf off his sleeve. "She reminds you of your wife?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Talia had that same quiet strength. And Lily, she's so much like her. It's hard sometimes to separate the grief from the love." Maya didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "It's okay to grieve. But don't let it keep you from seeing who Lily is now. She's not just a reflection of the past. She's the beginning of something new. The words sat heavy between them, but Richard didn't deflect, didn't retreat. He simply nodded, the edge of his mouth lifting slightly. A gust of wind swept through the trees, scattering leaves around their feet. Lily laughed, trying to catch one midair. Ethan helped. The two children ran circles around the bench, their laughter like music in the soft morning. Richard stood. I think I owe you more than an apology. Maya stood too, facing him. You owe Lily more than that. But I think you're working on it. I'd like to invite you both for dinner, at our house. Maya tilted her head. You cook? Let's just say I order very well. She laughed, and something in Richard's chest loosened for the first time in a long while. Okay, she said. Dinner. But no fancy stuff. Ethan hates napkins with folds. Noted, he said, smiling. As they watched their kids play in the leaves, the bench under the second maple became more than just a place to sit. It became a new beginning, quiet, steady, and real. The Evans estate stood like a sculpture carved into the hills of western Connecticut, sleek, modern, and unmistakably expensive. All sharp lines and floor-to-ceiling glass, it looked less like a home and more like a showroom from the outside. But inside, the evening light softened everything, spilling through the tall windows and catching on polished wood and warm copper fixtures. Maya paused at the front steps, Ethan holding her hand, his eyes wide. Mom, he whispered, this house is like Tony Stark's. She smiled down at him. Let's not break anything, okay? He nodded solemnly. Got it. The door opened before she could ring the bell. Richard stood there in a slate-gray sweater and dark jeans, no shoes, and for the first time, no armor in his expression. Come on in, he said. The warmth hit immediately, not just from the heating system or the faint scent of roasted rosemary chicken drifting from the kitchen, but from the stillness, the softness of the place. A tall bookshelf stood against one wall, not just for show but filled with books worn at the spine. A framed finger painting hung beside a black and white photo of Lily and her mother. Lily came skipping into the room, wearing a pink hoodie with a unicorn stitched on the chest. Hi, Maya. Hi, Ethan, she said, waving. Maya smiled. Hey there, superstar. Smells like someone's been busy in the kitchen. Lily giggled. Daddy only cooked the pasta. Miss Carla helped with the rest. Miss Carla? Maya asked, raising an eyebrow at Richard. The real master of the house, Richard replied dryly. Carla appeared a moment later, an older Latina woman in her 60s, short and round with a no-nonsense face and hands that looked like they'd stirred love into every meal for the past 40 years. You must be Maya, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. He doesn't bring people here, ever. Maya chuckled. Well, that explains the nervous energy. Carla winked. Let me finish up. You all go sit. The kids can eat in the breakfast nook. The dinner table, a long mahogany piece nestled near a wide window overlooking the trees, was already set. Nothing fancy. Simple plates, cloth napkins, a pitcher of apple cider. Maya and Richard sat across from each other while the kids dug into macaroni and cheese shaped like dinosaurs in the adjoining room. For a while they just ate. No speeches, no tension, just the quiet clink of forks and the occasional laugh from Ethan. Then Richard set his glass down and asked, How long have you been doing it alone? Maya didn't pretend not to understand. Since Ethan was born, she said. His father left before the baby shower, said he wasn't ready to be someone's dad. Richard winced. I'm sorry. She shrugged. It wasn't ideal, but it gave me something to fight for. And now, I wouldn't trade Ethan for the world. He studied her across the table. You're strong. Or stubborn, she replied with a smirk. Sometimes it's the same thing. A quiet moment passed. Richard sipped his cider, then looked out the window. You know, this house never felt empty until Talia died, he said softly. After that, it didn't matter how many lights were on. It was dark. No, Maya nodded. Grief does that. It moves in and tries to change your furniture. He let out a soft laugh. More breath than sound. I thought if I just controlled every detail, her therapy, the environment, the people she met, I could fix it. I didn't want her to feel what I felt. But pain doesn't work like that, Maya said. It doesn't wait for permission. It just shows up. Richard nodded slowly. I think I've been making everything worse by pretending I could outrun it. Oh, and yesterday, when you saw her smile at the park? He glanced toward the kitchen where Lily and Ethan were now giggling over an art project at the counter. I hadn't seen that smile in years, he admitted. It wasn't forced. It was free. Maya leaned forward, her voice gentler now. That's what she needs. Not protection from the world, but room to live in it. The conversation faded as Carla appeared with a plate of brownies still warm from the oven. Ethan and Lily rushed back in, faces covered in crumbs and happiness. Maya and Richard watched them for a moment. Two children, both scarred in their own ways, but laughing like all children should. Can we watch a movie? Lily asked. Only if I get to pick it, Ethan said. No scary stuff, Lily warned. Maya raised a hand. How about a compromise? Pixar. Deal, they both shouted. Richard turned on the projector in the family room and dimmed the lights. The four of them settled onto the massive sectional, kids snuggled under blankets, Maya cradling a cup of tea. Partway through the film, Lily leaned into Maya's side and whispered, "Thank you for drawing me like a superhero." Maya looked down at her. "That's because you are one." The little girl smiled, eyes shining. Not the sad smile of politeness, not the guarded smile of a child trying to please a grown-up, but a real one. Full, open, alive. Richard saw it, and for the second time that week, it brought a lump to his throat. He didn't say anything. He just watched this woman, this stranger, who had walked into their lives and somehow made the walls feel less high. Later, as Maya gathered her things to leave, Richard walked her to the door. "Thank you," he said again. "Not just for dinner, for this." Maya tilted her head. "I didn't do anything magic, Richard. I just saw her. That might be the most magical thing of all." "Oh." She paused, hand on the doorknob. "Good night, Richard." He smiled. "Good night, Maya." And when she stepped out into the cool autumn evening, the door closed behind her not with finality, but with quiet promise. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air as Maya stepped into Hazel and Vine, the neighborhood coffee shop nestled between a bookstore and an old pharmacy on Main Street. The floor creaked just right, the windows fogged with warmth against the cold October morning. A bell over the door jingled softly behind her. She glanced around locals with gray cardigans and folded newspapers, middle-aged women in yoga pants sipping chai lattes, and a college kid with earphones typing like his life depended on it. Everyone belonged in that quiet, structured hum, and yet, there he was, Richard Evans, sitting alone at a small corner table, blazer slung over the back of his chair, sleeves rolled up, and two cups in front of him. One half drunk, one untouched. His eyes met hers the moment she walked in, and for once, there was no hesitation. He stood up quickly. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Maya gave a small smile, easing her scarf from around her neck. "Well, your assistant left a message that sounded like an invitation and a challenge. She's overqualified in both departments," he said, pulling out a chair for her. She sat, setting her bag beside her. "So what's this about? You already said thank you, and your daughter already stole my heart." "Lo." He slid the untouched cup toward her. "Black, no sugar, right?" She raised an eyebrow. "Trying to impress me with memory now?" He smiled faintly. "Trying to make up for first impressions." Maya took a slow sip, the warmth coating her throat. Points awarded. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the hum of clinking mugs and low jazz spilling from the speakers above. "I wanted to talk," Richard began, "without the kids around. Without panic or bandages or misunderstandings." "No," Maya nodded. "All right, talk." He folded his hands. "I need help." That, she hadn't expected. "With Lily," he clarified. "With knowing what she needs now, how to be better. I thought I could manage it alone. But the truth is I don't even know where to begin." Maya softened, but didn't lean in yet. "You're not the first parent to admit that. You just might be the richest." That earned a chuckle. Probably true. He tapped his fingers lightly on the table. "Since my wife passed, I've made it about control, routines, expectations, keeping Lily safe at all costs. But I forgot what safe really looks like." Maya's voice was quieter now. "It looks like laughter. Like connection. Like knowing someone sees you, even when you're hurting. He looked at her, his expression open. That's what you gave her. What you gave us. I didn't do it for you. I know. Silence again. Not uncomfortable, but cautious, like standing on a frozen lake waiting to see if it will hold. Maya set down her coffee. So, what is it you're asking me, Richard? He hesitated. Would you consider spending more time with her? Not officially. Not like a therapist or a nanny or anything. Just someone she trusts. Maya leaned back. You want me to be her friend? More than that, he said. A safe person. A steady presence. For her. Maybe even for me. That last part hung in the air. She studied him. Behind the CEO posture and carefully curated humility, she saw the flicker of something real. Loneliness. Exhaustion. Hope. You're asking a lot. I know, and I already have a full-time job being a mom, an artist, a black woman trying to exist without being misunderstood daily. Richard looked down, nodding. I understand. But, Maya added, and his head snapped back up. I like Lily. And I care about what happens to her. So, let's start small. No expectations. No titles. Just time. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. Deal. A waitress passed by, dropping a fresh scone on their table without asking. On the house, she said with a wink. You two look like the only people in here actually talking to each other. They both laughed. Maya tore the scone in half, handing him a piece. So, what's the next step for Mr. Control? Richard leaned forward, elbows on the table. I was thinking, Sunday mornings at the park. Regular. Familiar. And maybe one afternoon a week at the house. Drawing, reading, movies, whatever Lily wants. Maya nodded slowly. And if Lily says she wants roller derby? I'll buy skates, he said with a straight face. She chuckled, shaking her head. You might actually be serious. I'm learning to take risks. Maya's gaze softened, a slight tilt of admiration forming. It's scary, huh? He didn't blink. Terrifying. But the sun had begun to pour more brightly through the window, illuminating the edge of his jaw, the curve of her cheekbone. Neither of them spoke of it. But something shifted then, not romantic. Not yet. But mutual. Alive. An understanding. They finished their coffee. No promises were made, no big declarations exchanged. But when Maya stood to leave, Richard held the door for her with quiet certainty. Tell Ethan he's still welcome to visit any time, he said. She smiled. As long as there are dinosaur mac and cheese and no napkin folding. He grinned. Deal. As Maya walked back down Main Street, scarf wrapped once more around her neck, she felt something unexpected, a sense of ease. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore, or guilt, or damage control. It was about choice, and she was beginning to choose this. The breeze that swept through Willow Glen Park on Sunday morning carried the kind of warmth that only came with early fall when the leaves had just begun to turn. But the air hadn't yet given up summer. The benches still held the sun's heat, and the children ran in light jackets, pretending they could see their breath in the chill that wasn't quite there yet. Maya arrived with a tote bag full of snacks, juice boxes, and a small folding blanket. She was dressed simply in jeans and a maroon sweatshirt, her natural curls tied back, sunglasses perched on her head. Ethan raced ahead toward the open lawn, carrying a paper kite they'd made the night before, its tail trailing ribbons of red and gold. She saw Richard and Lily already waiting under the second maple tree, the same one where everything had begun. This time, Richard didn't look like a stranger guarding a kingdom. He was sitting on the grass, his shoes off, his sleeves rolled up, and a smile tugging at his mouth as he helped Lily open a new sketchbook. When Maya approached, Lily looked up and grinned. You came! I made a promise, didn't I? Maya said, settling onto the blanket as she laid it out. Besides, I brought trail mix and dried mangoes. That's the good kind, Lily said seriously. Not the chewy, weird kind that tastes like medicine. Richard raised an eyebrow. I've been buying the medicine kind? Maya laughed. I hate to break it to you, but yes. She handed him a bag. Try this and tell me I'm wrong. He tasted, chewed, and nodded. You're not wrong. Ethan joined them a moment later, breathless. The kite almost flew into a tree, but I saved it. He thrust it toward Lily like a trophy. Lily clapped. We should make a kite for my doll, too. You name her yet? Maya asked. Lily looked thoughtful. I'm thinking. Blaze. Powerful, Maya said. I like it. The four of them sat together, the morning unfolding gently. Ethan and Lily drew superheroes in their sketchbooks: Blaze, the one-legged warrior queen, and Zoom, the squirrel sidekick with a jetpack. Maya sketched along with them, occasionally sipping from a thermos of tea. Richard mostly watched. The kind of watching that parents do when they realize the world might actually be okay, even for just one day. As the children played nearby, Maya and Richard sat in the shade, both leaning back against the trunk of the tree, shoulders nearly brushing. This is nice, Richard said, his voice low. It is, Maya agreed. You know, I never used to come to this park. Talia did. All the time. She loved this place. Said it made her feel like life was manageable. I never understood it until now. Maya glanced at him. That's grief. You don't get to pick how long it stays or what door it comes through. He nodded slowly. Sometimes I still hear her voice when I wake up. For half a second, I think she's in the kitchen making that awful French roast coffee she loved. And then, nothing. Just silence. Maya didn't fill the quiet. She let it be. Some silences deserve to stand on their own. I remember once, she finally said, after my grandmother died, I found myself making her gumbo recipe at 2 a.m. in my tiny apartment. I didn't even like gumbo, but I needed to feel like she was still near me. Richard looked at her, really looked. And did it help? I cried into the roux, she said, smiling. But yeah, it helped. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. The children would dart off to chase squirrels or jump into piles of leaves. And Maya and Richard would talk nothing deep, nothing heavy. Just presence. Around noon, Carla arrived, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and holding a brown paper bag. Excuse me, she said. I believe I was promised a picnic. I brought empanadas. Lily squealed. Yes. Carla laid out the food like a queen presiding over a banquet. There were little meat pies, homemade lemonade, and something sweet and flaky that Ethan called sugar moons. Carla, this is too much, Maya said. Carla waved her off. If I'm going to spy on my boss in the wild, I might as well be fed. Everyone laughed. Even Richard, who usually took himself too seriously for that sort of thing. They ate together on the blanket. Talked. Shared bites of food. And at some point, without anyone noticing exactly when, the park stopped feeling like a neutral zone and started feeling like common ground. Other families walked by and glanced their way. Some smiled. Some paused. A few mothers whispered to each other, and one older gentleman tipped his hat politely to Maya as he passed. There were, of course, still the occasional stares, the kind Maya had grown used to her entire life, but this time, they didn't sting. Because this time, she wasn't alone. After lunch, the kids took turns flying the kite. It dipped and soared in the breeze, catching the sunlight as it spun against the blue sky. At one point, it snagged in a tree, and Ethan groaned while Lily giggled uncontrollably. Team rescue, they shouted in unison. Maya and Richard sat on the bench now, watching the commotion. I keep thinking this will fall apart, he said, that I'll say the wrong thing or do something selfish and ruin it. Maya turned to him. You probably will. He blinked. That's honest. It's life. We mess up. But it's not about being perfect, Richard. It's about what you do after the mess. And so far, you're doing okay. He smiled. Okay is a big compliment coming from you. Don't get cocky. They both laughed, the sound blending with the breeze. Later, as the sun began to sink lower in the sky, casting golden halos through the trees, Maya gathered her things. Ethan was still trying to negotiate one more turn with the kite, and Lily was helping Carla pack up the food. Maya turned to Richard. Same time next week? He stood, brushing off his jeans. Next week, and maybe dinner again? She paused, considered. We'll see how your kite retrieving skills improve. High standards. Always. They smiled, and as Maya and Ethan walked away, hand in hand, Richard stayed on the bench for a while, watching the kite dip and twirl like a promise in the wind. The following Thursday began like any other in Willow Glen, sunlight dappling through golden trees, neighborhood sprinklers hissing rhythmically, and the soft thump of mailboxes closing as paperboys completed their rounds. But by mid-morning, something had shifted. Maya felt it the moment she walked into Grover's Market. She wasn't dressed unusually: jeans, a navy hoodie, her tote bag slung over her shoulder with Ethan's watercolors and a small sketch commission she had promised to drop off at the library. Yet the usual nods and neighborly smiles were absent. Eyes lingered longer. A woman in the bread aisle stopped mid-reach and turned the other way. Even the cashier, who always made corny jokes about bananas, barely met her eyes. She didn't know why, until she passed the magazine rack near the front counter. There, above the stack of tabloids and celebrity gossip, was the local society column, Connecticut Life and Living, and on the cover, beneath the bold headline, "From Parks to Private Dinners, Billionaire's New Flame," was a photo, grainy but unmistakable, of her and Richard. She remembered the exact moment. It was taken during their last Sunday at the park. Maya had been laughing, her face tilted toward Richard, who had just offered her a napkin after Ethan spilled lemonade. Their children were in the background, mid-laughter. A warm, candid scene. Out of context, it looked like something else entirely. Maya felt her pulse quicken as she read the subheading. Sources close to Evans hint at an emerging romance with local single mother. But is she just another opportunist? "Excuse me," a voice said behind her. Maya turned. It was Mrs. Halverson, one of the women from the PTA board, tightly wound and always ready, with a passive-aggressive compliment. Today, however, she wasn't pretending. "I always admired your strength," the woman said, voice syrupy. "Raising your son alone, but getting close to someone like Richard Evans, that's quite a leap, dear. Just be careful. Not everyone likes climbers." Maya's throat tightened. "Excuse me?" The woman smiled thinly. "Oh, no offense. I'm sure your intentions are good." Maya didn't respond. She simply turned, left her groceries in the cart, and walked out the door. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking. She sat behind the wheel, eyes stinging, trying to gather herself. She had fought too long, worked too hard to be reduced to some woman after a billionaire. She thought of Ethan. What would happen if someone said something to him at school? Then her phone buzzed. Richard Evans. She hesitated, then answered. "I assume you've seen it," he said, voice tight. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, Maya. I don't know who leaked the photo. I didn't even know it had been taken." "You're a billionaire," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "People follow you. That's not news to me." He paused. "Do you want me to issue a statement? Clarify it's not romantic?" Maya closed her eyes. The question hung there like a blade. "I don't need a statement," she said after a moment. "I need to know if this changes anything between you and Lily. Or you and me." "No," he said immediately. "It doesn't." "Then we'll deal with it." That night, Maya didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table long after Ethan went to bed, rereading the article online, scanning the comments. Most were benign. Some were supportive, but a few were laced with venom. "Of course she's after money. Look at her. Bet she planned this from the start. Women like her always have an angle." She didn't need to ask what women like her meant. She'd known since she was 10 years old and followed around a department store for touching the expensive handbags. The next morning, Maya pulled up to Willow Glen Elementary, heart pounding. She waited at the gate, anxiety crawling up her spine. Would the teachers whisper? Would the other parents give her the same sideways glances? But then she saw them, Lily and Ethan, walking out together, both wearing cardboard crowns with glitter and feathers. Ethan was explaining something animatedly, probably about space robots, and Lily was laughing so hard she tripped over her prosthetic leg, then bounced up like nothing happened. Maya exhaled. The kids hadn't read the gossip. They were still just kids. Later that afternoon, Richard called again. "I want to meet. Not at the park. Somewhere quieter." She agreed to meet him at a walking path near the reservoir, less traffic, fewer eyes. When she arrived, he was already waiting, hands in his coat pockets, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "I'm furious," he said before she even spoke. Not just about the photo, but the narrative. Like you're some plot device. Maya folded her arms. It's the price of proximity, Richard. You're protected. I'm not. He looked at her, his expression dark. You shouldn't have to pay for standing beside me. But I do, she said. People see us, and they make assumptions. Some see race, some see class, some just see opportunity. And they all assume I'm not enough on my own. He stepped closer. You are enough. More than. Maya searched his face, unsure whether to believe it. Then let me handle it my way. I don't need you issuing statements like I'm a scandal to fix. What I need is your respect and your honesty. He nodded slowly. You have both. Fully. She looked away, watching the water shimmer in the late afternoon. Sunday ducks floated past. Children's voices echoed from the other side of the path. Let's just keep this about the kids, she said after a while. They're the reason we're even in each other's orbit. Richard didn't push. He didn't ask for more. He simply said, all right, for them. They walked in silence for a while, side by side, the tension loosening just slightly. As Maya turned to leave, she looked at him once more. We'll survive this, but we survive it on my terms. Richard nodded, understood. And with that, Maya walked back toward her car, not angry, not defeated, just steady, determined. Because she knew who she was, and no tabloid could write her story better than she could. The following week passed quietly, too quietly. Maya noticed the change almost immediately. Richard stopped texting as often. Their Sunday at the park was canceled due to business obligations. And though she believed the excuse, something in his tone had shifted, more reserved, more measured, as if someone had turned the volume down on the connection they were slowly building. She tried not to take it personally. After all, life was complicated, especially for men like him. Instead, she poured her attention into Ethan, whose science fair was fast approaching, and into her freelance commissions. Her evenings were filled with pencil sketches and the steady rhythm of jazz on vinyl. The stillness in her home gave her space to think, but sometimes, space brought clarity she didn't ask for. One night, while erasing a mistake on a charcoal piece, Maya's phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. You're not the first. Just don't expect the fairy tale. She froze. The message was followed by an attached image. A cropped photo of Richard with a tall, elegant woman, olive-skinned, well-dressed, clearly not candid. The date stamp showed it had been taken just 3 months before Maya had met him. Maya stared at it for a moment, then set the phone down. She knew bait when she saw it, and she refused to bite. Still, a part of her couldn't ignore the chill that crept up her arms, not because of the woman, but because she now had proof someone was watching, digging, targeting. The following day, she decided to confront it. Instead of calling Richard, she drove to the Evans estate late afternoon. She knew Lily was at piano lessons, and she didn't want an audience. Carla answered the door, eyebrows lifting in surprise. Is he in? Maya asked gently. Carla nodded. Library. I'll tell him you're here. Maya walked down the familiar hallway, passing the portraits and curated art pieces. The same warmth she'd once felt in this house had faded, replaced by a muted, formal atmosphere like a guest overstaying their welcome. She found Richard standing near a bookshelf, scrolling through emails on his phone. He looked up, startled. Maya. She held up her phone. Someone sent this to me last night. Anonymous. Along with a warning. Richard took the phone, his jaw tightening as he saw the image. That's her name's Marissa, a business associate. We went to a gala together in June. That's all. Maya crossed her arms. You don't owe me an explanation. I'm not asking because of jealousy, Richard. I'm asking because someone is actively trying to sabotage this. Us. The kids. Whatever this has been. He looked at her then, expression darkening. I've made enemies over the years. People who don't like seeing me. Human. She raised an eyebrow. You mean vulnerable? He didn't deny it. I can handle whispers, Maya said. I can handle assumptions, articles, people staring, but I need to know if you can. If you're willing to stand in it with me, not just when it's comfortable or private, but when it's complicated. Richard rubbed a hand over his mouth, then turned away slightly, as if collecting himself. I've been protecting Lily for so long, he said finally. controlling every element of her world. I thought if I just kept things clean, polished, untouched, she'd be safe. But it's all an illusion. I couldn't even protect you. Maya stepped closer. I'm not asking you to protect me. I'm asking you not to disappear. He looked at her again this time, no wall in his eyes. I wasn't disappearing, he said. I was afraid of what this means, of what people see when they look at us, of what I might lose. She tilted her head, and now, he exhaled. Now I see that fear doesn't excuse silence. He stepped forward. I want to fix this, not with a statement, not with damage control, but with truth, if you'll let me. Maya nodded, slowly. Then start with Lily. That evening, the Evans house opened its doors again, but this time not for a dinner or a quiet movie night. This time, it was for healing. Carla prepared a simple meal. Lily returned from piano practice and squealed when she saw Maya and Ethan already there, coloring at the kitchen island. And Richard? He sat down beside them, not above, not apart, but beside, asking about their day, complimenting Ethan's sketch, listening to Lily describe the difficult part in her song where she kept missing the F sharp. After dinner, Maya and Richard stood on the back patio while the kids chased fireflies in the yard. I want to show people what's real, Richard said quietly. Not spin a narrative, but live one. And if the world doesn't like it, too bad. Maya glanced at him. That's a bold change of heart. He smiled faintly. You're not the first to tell me that. Meh. She looked back out at the lawn. Then let's do it right. Together. On our terms. He nodded, and under the soft hum of porch lights and the laughter of children echoing under the stars, they began again not as headlines or cautionary tales, but as people choosing honesty over fear. Autumn deepened in Willow Glen, painting the sidewalks in hues of amber, copper, and fire. Pumpkins appeared on porches. Knitted scarves grew thicker. The breeze carried the scent of cider and chimney smoke. At the Evans estate, change wasn't just in the leaves. Lily had begun drawing again. Not just the occasional sketch, but stories' entire universes on paper. Her favorite was Blaze, a fearless little girl superhero, with a mechanical leg that gave her rocket-powered jumps. Maya found stacks of illustrations tucked around the house on the kitchen counter, beneath couch cushions, taped gently to her bedroom door. And Lily smiled more, laughed harder, walked taller. Richard noticed. He also noticed how his own shoulders didn't feel as heavy when Maya was around. He found himself looking forward to her voice, the sound of her stirring tea, the quiet grace with which she filled spaces that used to echo. Tonight was the school's annual Fall Family Dance, a modest event in the elementary school gymnasium, complete with string lights, paper leaves, and enough cupcakes to sugar a whole town. Richard had never attended before, but this year, Lily had asked, "Will you come?" She'd said simply, tugging at his sleeve. And maybe Maya and Ethan too? So he said yes. Now, under the dim lights and pop music echoing through the gym, Maya stood near the refreshment table in a burgundy dress and boots, sipping apple punch from a paper cup. Ethan was on the floor, teaching Lily how to floss. Her prosthetic leg didn't slow her down. If anything, she seemed to dance harder, arms flailing, cheeks flushed with joy. Richard stood nearby, watching them, hands in his pockets. "You've got some good moves out there," Maya teased, sidling up beside him. He smirked. "I'm more of a slow dance type." "Of course you are." "Let me guess, Sinatra." "Bill Withers." Maya's smile widened. Respect. They watched the kids for a moment. Ethan now pretended to faint dramatically, and Lily collapsed in giggles beside him. Several other children joined in, forming a laughing pile of limbs and happiness. "She doesn't look like someone who was once too scared to speak in front of a class," Richard murmured. "No," Maya said, her voice soft. "She doesn't." The principal tapped the mic near the DJ booth. "All right, everyone, grab your grown-up. It's time for the parent-kid slow dance." Lily popped up immediately. "Daddy, come dance with me." Richard hesitated. His gaze flicked to Maya, who gave a subtle nod. He moved onto the floor, taking Lily's hand. The lights dimmed, and a familiar tune filled the room. "Lean on Me." Slow, classic, undeniably heartfelt. They danced in a small circle, Lily's feet atop his shoes for balance. her arms wrapped around his waist. For a moment, the gym disappeared. It was just the two of them. Maya watched from the side, heart tugging at the sight. Carla, who had come to chaperone, but mostly to eat cupcakes, joined her. "He's not the same man who yelled at you in the park." Maya nodded. "No, he's better." "Huh." Carla nudged her. "You did that." "No," Maya corrected. "Lily did." The song ended. Applause rippled through the crowd. As the evening wound down, Maya helped clean up the tables while Richard herded the kids toward the coat rack. "You know," he said as she folded a paper banner, "I never imagined enjoying something like this." "Like what?" she asked. "A school dance, punch, cheesy music, the smell of rubber gym floors." She chuckled. "Welcome to real life, Mr. Evans." He paused. "You make it look good." She turned toward him. The words hung between them, gentle, unforced. Not a flirtation. A truth. "I should get the kids home," she said, glancing toward Ethan, who was attempting to carry a stack of coats that was taller than him. "Let me walk you out," Richard offered. They stepped outside together. The night was crisp, the sky clear. Stars blinked above like curious eyes. As Ethan and Lily raced ahead toward the car, Maya and Richard slowed behind them. "You've changed, you know," she said. He looked at her. "How so?" "You don't lead with power anymore. You lead with presence." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "That's because someone reminded me that being present is the only way to matter." They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the kids climb into the back seat. Richard looked at her, voice low. "Can I ask something?" "Of course." "No. Is there a version of this, of us, that you'd want? Someday?" Maya searched his face, careful, vulnerable, honest. "Someday," she said quietly. "But not on paper. Not for the cameras. Not to prove a point. No statements," he said with a nod. "Just life. Just life." He held the car door for her. She stepped in, offered a small smile, and drove off into the night, leaving behind glitter, laughter, and something slowly growing in the space between hearts. The city was louder that day, horns honking with little patience, street vendors shouting over each other, and wind pushing crisp leaves through narrow alleyways like secrets refusing to stay hidden. Maya wasn't used to being downtown this early, but Ethan had forgotten his science fair trifold at Richard's estate, and with the fair that afternoon, there wasn't time for excuses. She parked 2 blocks from Evans Corp headquarters, the mirrored tower scraping the sky with the kind of silent arrogance only old money could afford. Maya walked through the glass doors with purpose, her heels clicking on the polished marble. Heads turned, some nodded in recognition, a few whispered. She didn't care. "Miss Williams?" said the front desk attendant, straightening. "I'm just here to pick up my son's project." Richard Mr. Evans left it with the front desk. The attendant's phone buzzed. "Actually, he'd like to see you upstairs. He said you'd say yes." Maya sighed with a tired smile. Of course he did. The elevator ride was smooth, too quiet. As it climbed past the 20th floor, it stopped with a ding at the 22nd, and a woman entered. Tall, model thin, expensive perfume clinging like intention. Maya didn't need to guess this was Marissa, the woman from the leaked photo, the woman whose presence had haunted 100 unspoken thoughts. Marissa pressed the button for the 30th floor, glanced sideways. Her eyes swept over Maya's tote bag, her natural curls, her jeans, and finally her face. "You must be the reason Richard stopped returning calls," she said coolly. Maya didn't flinch. "I'm the reason Lily started laughing again, but sure, let's go with that." The woman blinked, briefly thrown off. "I just find it fascinating how quickly some people adapt to luxury. And I find it fascinating how some people mistake attention for affection." Marissa smiled without warmth. "You talk like someone who thinks they're staying." Maya's eyes narrowed, her voice calm. "I don't need to stay. I was never here to climb ladders. I was here because a little girl needed someone to see her. And I did. Before the world did. Before the gossip columns. Before you even remembered her name." The elevator dinged. Maya stepped out onto the 31st floor, her head held high, her heart steady. leaving Marissa behind in a space full of mirrors that couldn't reflect anything real. Richard was waiting at the glass wall of his office, overlooking the skyline, holding the forgotten trifold project in both hands, like it was priceless art. "I added extra tape to the corners," he said when she entered, smiling. "Didn't want it to fall apart during judging." Maya took it. "Thanks. He's nervous about today." "Nah, he'll be fine. He's brilliant. He gets that from you." She glanced out the window, then back at him. "I ran into someone." "In the elevator." Richard sighed, already knowing. "Marissa? She's confident. She's threatened," he said plainly, "because she mistook a public partnership for personal investment. She's not the only one who does that in my world." Maya set the project down gently. "I'm not part of your world, Richard." "I know. But Lily is." He nodded. "Yes, she is." "No." Maya walked to the window beside him. "So we protect her. That's the only world that matters." He looked at her, his voice low. "And what about us?" Maya didn't answer right away. Instead, she touched the cold glass, watching the traffic below blur into motion. "Ask me again," she said softly. "When the world stops watching. When no one else is in the elevator." Richard looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Instead, he walked her to the door, and as Maya stepped back into the hall, she turned. "Oh, and Richard?" "Yes?" "If Marissa ever speaks to Lily with the tone she used on me, I won't need a headline to respond." He smiled, noted. That afternoon, the school gym buzzed with science fair chaos, baking soda volcanoes, homemade robots, potato batteries lighting up tiny bulbs. Ethan stood proudly by his trifold, talking to a judge with hand gestures that suggested he may accidentally take flight. Maya stood nearby, watching, heart full. And then Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Do you think Blaze would like science fairs?" Maya smiled. "Blaze is a science fair." They laughed, and Lily held out a folded paper. "I drew this. It's for you." Maya opened it slowly. It was a picture of the four of them, Maya, Ethan, Lily, and Richard, standing under a tree. But the tree wasn't broken or shadowed like the one in the park had once been. This one was in full bloom, petals swirling in a warm breeze, and above it, a banner read, "Home is where we feel safe." Maya blinked fast. The past didn't matter in that moment. Neither did tabloid whispers, elevator encounters, or social boundaries. What mattered was this. A girl who once sat alone now danced with her heart wide open. A boy who once kept to himself now shared joy without fear. And a man learning to father without armor was, little by little, becoming more human than myth. And Maya? She wasn't watching from the edges anymore. She was part of the picture. The letter came on a Tuesday. No stamp, no return address. Just her name, Maya Williams, written in careful cursive across the front of a cream-colored envelope slipped beneath the door of her apartment. At first, she thought it was from a client, maybe a thank you note or commission inquiry. But as she slid the paper from its sleeve, the words inside made her breath catch. "You think you know who he is. You don't. Look deeper. Not everything buried stays that way." Folded inside the note was a single photograph, aged, a little yellowed, with jagged edges like it had been torn from an album. It showed a young Richard Evans, maybe in his early 20s, standing beside a man Maya didn't recognize. The two were at a construction site, hard hats resting under their arms, but what drew her attention wasn't their faces. It was the man beside Richard. On his neck, faint but visible, was a tattoo, a coiled serpent entwined with a $sign. Maya had seen that tattoo once before. Years ago, in her neighborhood, just before her cousin Darius disappeared after taking a job he never spoke about again. The same tattoo on the neck of the man who picked him up in a black sedan and never brought him back. Her stomach turned. She looked again at Richard's young face, open, smiling, oblivious, or was he? Her phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Richard, big board meeting tomorrow, but can we have dinner Thursday? Just us. I'll cook." Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then she typed, "Maya, sure, I have something I want to talk about anyway." That Thursday, she drove up the familiar winding road to the Evans estate. Ethan was at Carla's for a sleepover, and Maya felt the rare weight of an evening without his chatter, a silence that wasn't restful tonight. She carried the letter in her coat pocket. Richard greeted her at the door in jeans and a navy sweater, barefoot, wine already breathing on the kitchen island. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon, and soft jazz played through the built-in speakers. "You came," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "I always keep my promises." He offered her a glass of wine. "You okay?" "I've had better weeks," she replied honestly. He tilted his head. "Want to talk about it now?" "Let's eat first," she said gently. "Then I will." Dinner was grilled chicken with herbed couscous and roasted carrots. Simple, real, the kind of meal shared by people building something slowly, not rushing. After clearing the dishes, they sat in the sunroom, stars blinking outside the tall windows. Maya reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope, placing it on the table between them. Richard's face tightened the moment he saw it. "Where did you get this?" "It was left at my door. No name." He opened the envelope. When he saw the photograph, his jaw locked. "I know that man," Maya said softly. "That tattoo. I've seen it before. My cousin Darius worked with someone like him. Then he disappeared. I never saw him again." Richard didn't respond right away. Maya leaned in. "Tell me the truth. Was this you? Were you involved with these men?" He exhaled slowly, pain flickering behind his eyes. "No," he said, "but my father was." Maya sat back. "I was 19, he began. "My father ran Evans Development, the company I later inherited. Back then, he was cutting deals that weren't clean. Labor off the books. Consultants from the wrong side of the law. I didn't know the depth of it, not then. I was a college student trying to prove I could carry his legacy." He looked at the photo. "That man, his name was Felix. He worked with my father for almost a decade. The tattoo? That was part of his crew. They used it as a mark of allegiance, like a brand." Maya's voice was quiet. "So you did know him?" "I met him once, at that site. That photo, taken by the city's PR team before an inspection, I didn't even realize I was in it. After that, Felix disappeared. Rumors said he went south after laundering some money through a side deal. My father denied it. But I started digging. What I found was bad." He paused. "That's when I walked away. From my father, from the company. I spent 2 years abroad, in community development, trying to clear my conscience. I came back when he died, took over the company, and cut ties with every shadow he left behind." Maya sat in silence, heart thudding. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to see the ghost I used to be." She swallowed hard. "You should have trusted me to decide for myself." Richard nodded. "You're right." They sat there, the envelope between them, heavy with a past neither of them had chosen but both had inherited in different ways. Finally, Maya whispered, "My cousin never came home, Richard." "I'm sorry." She looked up. "I need you to help me find out what happened to him. If there's even a chance your father's dealings crossed paths with Darius, I have to know." Richard didn't hesitate. "Then we'll find out. Together." She exhaled slowly, something inside her loosening. "All right." He reached for her hand, not to pull her close, but to anchor them both in something real. Outside, the stars glinted cold and clear. Inside, 2 people sat at a table where trust had cracked but not broken, and somewhere in the folds of the past, a buried truth stirred, ready to rise. The next morning, Maya stood in front of the Evans Estates garage with her arms crossed, waiting for Richard. When he emerged from the side entrance holding 2 large thermoses and a set of keys, she was already pacing. "I'm not nervous," she said without looking at him. "I didn't say you were," he replied, handing her the coffee. She took it with a grateful nod. I've been asking questions about Darius for years." Every door slammed shut. Every voice went quiet. It felt like the more I pushed, the more invisible he became. Richard unlocked the garage. Inside, behind a row of vintage cars, was a smaller door Maya hadn't noticed before. He led her through it into a narrow corridor that descended beneath the house. "What is this?" she asked. "Storage," Richard replied. "Old records, documents my father never digitized. Most of it's construction permits and outdated invoices, but if there's anything connected to Felix or your cousin, it'll be here." The air in the underground archive was dry and cool. Fluorescent lights flickered above rows of steel shelves stacked with labeled boxes, decades of paper, the bones of a business empire. They worked in silence. Maya flipped open file after file, scanning for names she recognized: Felix, Darius, even nicknames she'd heard whispered at family barbecues before they stopped saying them out loud. "Did your father keep any kind of ledger?" she asked. Richard looked up from his stack. "He kept two." She froze. "Two?" He nodded grimly. "One for the IRS, one for himself." It took hours, but finally, Richard pulled a leather-bound book from a bottom drawer of an old cabinet. It was scuffed, the pages stiff with time. On the inside cover was a single word in faded gold: Providence. He opened it, thumbing carefully through columns of names, dates, numbers, initials, and codes. Maya stood beside him, scanning entries. "Here," she said suddenly, pointing. "DJW, delivery, June 2006, $3,000, Southport Site B." "That's the month Darius disappeared," she whispered. Richard squinted at the page. "Site B, that's not a construction site. That's a warehouse. It was listed under a dummy LLC. Evans never disclosed it publicly. My father used it for storage, but it was empty half the year, except June 2006. Maya's hands trembled slightly. "We need to see it." Richard hesitated. "The building was sold last year, but I can pull the old blueprints, see if anything stands out." They returned upstairs. While Richard dove into digital archives, Maya sat in his study, heart pounding, memories bubbling up. The last time she saw Darius, he was wearing a red windbreaker, whistling as he promised he'd be back in time for dinner. He never was, and no one answered her mother's calls. Not the temp agency, not the man in the black sedan, not the police. She leaned back, eyes closed. For years, she'd buried that grief beneath motherhood, bills, survival. But now it was surfacing. "Got it," Richard called from the next room. Maya rushed in. He pulled up a digital blueprint of the Southport warehouse. "There's a sublevel," he said. "Unfinished. Never reported to city inspectors. Probably accessed through a back freight elevator." She stared at the map. "What was your father hiding down there?" He didn't answer. Instead, he picked up his phone. "I'll call the new owner. See if they'll let us in." To their surprise, the property was still vacant. The new owner was a developer out of state who agreed to let Richard do a brief inspection, no questions asked, once he heard the Evans name. 2 days later, they arrived at the warehouse. It was colder inside than out. Dust clung to the air like fog. The concrete floor echoed beneath their footsteps. "This way," Richard said, leading her behind a rusted shelf where the elevator shaft still sat intact. The button panel was cracked, but the door creaked open under pressure. They descended in darkness. The sublevel smelled like mold and forgotten time. Flashlights revealed long corridors lined with broken shelving, old tarps, and forgotten crates. Maya's breath caught when she saw an old workbench in the corner covered in initials etched into the wood. She walked over slowly, running her fingers along the surface. "DJW." She traced the letters. Richard crouched beside her. He was here. Maya stepped back, hands covering her mouth. "This is real. This is proof." "More than that," Richard said, pulling open a drawer under the bench. Inside was a small notebook, thin, worn. He opened it. Names, schedules, payment records, nicknames. One entry stood out. D. Asking too many questions. Talked to R. Told him to keep the kid quiet. Maya felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "R," she whispered. "Your father?" Richard nodded. He knew. They stood in silence, the weight of decades pressing down on them. Maya clutched the notebook. "This could open everything." "Are you sure you want to?" Richard asked gently. "Once it's out, there's no going back." She looked at him, jaw firm. Darius deserves more than silence. He deserves truth. Richard met her gaze. "Then we'll make it public. Carefully. Legally. I'll call someone I trust at the DA's office." Maya nodded, tears brimming but not falling. "Thank you." "No," Richard said. "Thank you for refusing to forget." As they ascended back to the surface, Maya felt the beginning of something shift. A chapter closing. Another opening. The story wasn't over, but now it had a path forward. And for the first time in years, she wasn't walking it alone. Richard stood at the podium, palms resting on either side of the polished oak. The City Hall chamber was full journalists, city officials, and a scattering of concerned citizens in fold-out chairs. Camera lights blinked like 1,000 tiny accusations. Behind him, the city seal gleamed beneath the dim fluorescence. Maya sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her cousin Darius's notebook rested inside her tote bag, now scanned, copied, and delivered to the district attorney's office. The weight of that evidence was no longer just hers to carry, but her heart still pounded. Richard adjusted the mic. "Good afternoon. Thank you for being here." The hum of voices dropped to silence. "I've called this press conference not as the CEO of Evans Corp., but as a one who recently uncovered evidence of unethical, and in some cases, criminal practices that occurred under my family's name before I inherited the company." He paused, letting the weight settle. "My father, Charles Evans, engaged in partnerships that violated both legal and moral boundaries. We now have documentation previously hidden that connects him to multiple shell entities, unregulated labor arrangements, and at least one known case of coercion involving a missing worker, Darius James Williams." Murmurs erupted across the room. Maya felt her throat tighten. "I met Mr. Williams once, briefly, in my early 20s. I had no idea at the time that the job he was promised would become a death sentence." Richard's voice cracked slightly. "I want to say this clearly, publicly, and without legal jargon. My father's actions were wrong. Covering them up was wrong. And remaining silent, whether out of ignorance or fear, was also wrong. Today, we break that silence." A reporter raised a hand. "Are you suggesting your father is responsible for Mr. Williams' disappearance?" Richard replied firmly. "I'm stating that the evidence points to a chain of events. My father initiated events that led to that young man vanishing. While we can't change the past, we can make it public, pursue justice, and dismantle the systems that allowed it." Another hand shot up. "Why now? Why speak out after all these years?" Richard didn't look at Maya, but his voice softened. "Because someone refused to forget, and because I couldn't look my daughter in the eye, or myself in the mirror, without making this right." The press conference continued another 20 minutes, questions, clarifications, legal statements. The DA confirmed a formal investigation was underway. Evans Corp. pledged to fund an independent inquiry and donate to organizations supporting families of the missing. When it was over, Richard walked off the stage. He didn't go to the lawyers or the cameras. He went straight to Maya. She stood. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room buzzed around them, but in their bubble, it was still. "I didn't expect that," she finally whispered. "Not all of it. Not like that." "Oh, it was time," he said. Maya looked into his eyes, clear, steady, no spin. "You did good, Richard. I didn't do it for praise. I know, that's why it means something." He exhaled slowly. "We've opened a door, Maya. But you know how this works. There's going to be pushback. Old friends of my father, investors, maybe even board members, they're not going to like this. Let them not like it," she said. "Let them squirm. We're not children anymore." "No," he said, "we're not." That night, the story broke on all major outlets. Headlines read, "Evans Corp. CEO exposes father's dark legacy." "Missing worker case reopened after 17 years." "Black woman's pursuit of truth forces billionaire's reckoning." The third one hit Maya hardest. She sat on her couch, Ethan asleep beside her, his little hand tangled in hers. On the coffee table, the TV flashed through talking heads, panel debates, and replays of Richard's speech. Carla called to say she was proud. Lily had drawn a new picture, Maya wearing a crown, standing in front of a courthouse. Underneath, Lily had written in careful block letters, "Justice Lady." Richard texted a single message. "No matter what comes next, we keep walking." Maya stared at those words. She thought of Darius, of her younger self, standing in police stations, holding his photo, begging for updates, of slammed doors and shrugged shoulders. And now this, not an ending, but a beginning. She typed back, "We walk, even if it's uphill." And they did. Over the next few weeks, reporters dug deeper. Former employees came forward. Families who had lost sons and brothers stepped into the light, some for the first time. Maya met with them, one by one, She listened. She shared. And quietly, she became something more than just a woman seeking answers. She became a bridge. And Richard? He stood beside her, not as a shield, but as an ally, one who had once worn armor, now choosing honesty instead. For every board member who threatened to resign, 5 employees wrote thank you letters. For every whisper about scandal, someone else whispered, finally. Late one evening, after another long day of interviews and strategy meetings, Maya stood in the Evans estate's garden. The cherry trees were bare now, but the branches arched like hope, waiting to bloom. Richard found her there. "Do you ever think," he asked, "about what might have happened if you hadn't gone to the park that day?" Maya smiled, not looking at him. "I think about it all the time, and I always come to the same answer. What? I'd still be who I am. And you? You'd still be hiding." He chuckled softly. "Fair enough." She turned to face him. "You ready for what's next?" "No," he said, "but I'm not afraid of it either." Neither was she, because truth, however messy, however painful, had become their shared language, and they were finally fluent. The Sunday after the press conference was unusually quiet. No news vans, no phone calls, no urgent emails buzzing at dawn. Just the kind of peaceful morning Maya hadn't felt in years, one where the world didn't demand her fire, her fight, or her pain. She stood at the kitchen sink of the Evans estate, sunlight pouring in through the windows as she sliced strawberries for pancakes. The smell of coffee filled the air. Somewhere upstairs, Ethan was humming to himself while Lily practiced the piano clumsily but with joy. Richard walked in barefoot, hair still tousled from sleep, wearing a plain white t-shirt and soft gray sweats. He paused at the doorway, watching her for a moment. "You look calm," he said. "I don't trust it," she replied, smirking. He chuckled. "Peace is suspicious, huh? In my life, always." "Dodd." He walked over, stole a strawberry from her cutting board. "Still sweet," he said. "Some things are," she replied softly. They ate together at the breakfast nook with the French doors open to the garden. The cherry trees, still leafless, cast long shadows across the patio. A single bird chirped in the distance, brave and out of season. After breakfast, the kids ran outside, coats half-zipped, cheeks flushed with freedom. Richard leaned back, coffee in hand. "I spoke to the DA again last night. They're officially reopening the investigation into Darius's disappearance. Said your testimony and the ledger are enough to move forward." Maya nodded, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I thought I'd feel more relief." "You don't?" "I feel grief. Like I've dragged the truth out of the grave, but Darius is still gone. And now there's just a hole where hope used to live." Richard reached across the table, his hand resting gently over hers. "You didn't do this alone. You don't have to carry it alone either." She looked at him, eyes raw. "It never gets easier, does it? Saying their names, holding their stories, fighting to prove they mattered." "No," he said, "but it matters every time." They sat in the quiet for a while. No phones, no distractions, just the slow unfolding of trust. Then Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it. "It's Carla. She's organizing a candlelight vigil next week. For Darius, and anyone else who never came home." Richard nodded. "I'll be there." "You don't have to." "I want to." She smiled faintly. "There'll be press. I'll wear my good coat." Later that afternoon, Maya helped Lily build a rocket ship out of cardboard in the driveway. Ethan insisted on making flame decals with glitter paint, while Richard tried unsuccessfully to attach a tiny flag to the top using duct tape. Maya stood back for a moment, watching them. This wasn't the life she'd imagined. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't painless. But it was honest, and that made it beautiful. That evening, she stepped outside for a walk alone. The neighborhood was quiet driveways lined with raked leaves, porch lights flicking on one by one like blinking fireflies. Maya turned onto a small trail behind the property, a path she'd taken many times before. But tonight, she didn't rush it. She thought about her mother, about the weight of expectations, about how survival had once been her only ambition, and now, somehow, she was holding truth in one hand and possibility in the other. Halfway through the trail, she stopped. There, nailed to a wooden post beside the path, was a small sign she hadn't seen before. In memory of the voices that were silenced, and the hearts that wouldn't let them go. It wasn't official, it wasn't fancy, just black lettering on white plastic. But it stopped her in her tracks, and beneath it, someone had left a single white candle, unlit, waiting. Maya crouched down, pulled a lighter from her pocket habit from years of lighting incense on anniversaries and vigils. She lit the wick. The flame flickered against the wind but held. She whispered, "This is for you, Darius. You're not lost. You're remembered." Behind her, footsteps crunched gently on the trail. Richard, he didn't speak, just stood beside her. They watched the candle together, its small light unwavering. Finally, Maya spoke. "When this is all over, I don't want to go back to pretending." "You won't have to. I mean it," she said, turning to him. "No masks, no image control, no acting like we live in different worlds." "I don't want different worlds," he said. "I just want us." She nodded slowly. "Then let's build it. Not perfect, just real." Richard took her hand, and in that moment, with the candle burning, the truth between them finally had space to breathe. The night of the vigil arrived beneath a slate-gray sky, the kind that threatened rain but never quite delivered, like the weather itself was holding its breath. Maya stood at the edge of the park's main lawn, just beneath the old elm tree that now bore a bronze plaque with Darius's name. A soft circle of lanterns lit the clearing, their warm glow flickering across a growing crowd. Neighbors, activists, city workers, former Evans Corp employees, and dozens of strangers who had read about the case and felt compelled to come. She wore a simple black coat and gloves, nothing performative, nothing polished, just present. In her pocket, she carried a folded copy of Darius's last note to her, the one he scribbled on the back of a gas station receipt before heading off to that job all those years ago. "Be good. Watch Ethan grow up for me if I'm late. I love you, cousin." He'd never been on time again. Carla arrived first, arms full of candles and a hot thermos of cider. She kissed Maya's cheek, her eyes already red-rimmed. "He'd be proud," she whispered. "He'd say we were late," Maya replied with a soft smile. "He always hated when I took too long to get dressed." Laughter, brief but warm, passed between them. Then came Richard. He wore a long navy wool coat and walked beside Lily and Ethan, each holding a candle in their mittened hands. The sight of them blended, honest, quietly resilient, sent a ripple through the crowd. As Richard approached, people turned, some murmuring, others clapping lightly. No security guards, no entourage, just a man, a father, a human being. He nodded at Maya, his eyes asking permission to stand beside her. She gave it with a glance. When the crowd had settled into a respectful hush, Maya stepped forward. A small microphone had been set up, but she didn't need it. Her voice carried on its own now. "Thank you all for coming," she began, heart steady, words clear. "My name is Maya Williams. I'm not a politician. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not anyone special. I'm just someone who loved her cousin, and I'm standing here because he didn't get the chance to stand again." She unfolded the note from her pocket. "This was the last thing Darius ever wrote to me. Nothing profound. Just a reminder to watch over Ethan. I think about that line a lot if I'm late. He wasn't late. He was taken. Erased. Hidden. And for a long time, I believed that silence was the end of his story." She paused, voice catching. "But silence is not the end. We can write beyond it." She stepped back, and Richard moved forward. He didn't speak long. Darius was one name in a long list that my father tried to bury under cement and money. We're here tonight to say, no more. Not one more name. Not one more family. Not one more future stolen without accountability. He looked out at the crowd. "I can't change what was done, but I can change what's next. And I intend to." After him came others. A teacher who remembered Darius's jokes in math class. A woman who once shared a meal with him at a shelter. A young man who had been recruited by the same shadowy consultants, but fled before it was too late. Each voice added to the portrait. Each memory chiseled away at the hollow absence left behind. And then, one by one, candles were lit. Maya lit the first, Lily the second, Ethan the third. As the flames multiplied across the lawn, Maya stepped back into the crowd, her chest tight but no longer heavy. Richard came to her side. "That was beautiful," he said. "It wasn't a performance," she answered. "I know." They stood in silence, the glow of remembrance reflecting in their eyes. Then someone behind them cleared their throat. Maya turned. It was a woman late 50s, African American, dressed in a heavy burgundy shawl. Her face looked vaguely familiar, though Maya couldn't place it. "I'm sorry," the woman said gently. "I've been trying to find the right time to approach you." Maya nodded. "It's okay. What is it?" The woman hesitated, then handed her a small photo. "This is my son, Tyrell. He worked at the same Southport site. Around the same time Darius went missing. I didn't know until I saw your story. We lost him too." Maya stared at the boy in the photo. 17. Maybe. Kind eyes. Half smile. Another name. Another story. Unfinished. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, voice breaking. "You're doing what so many of us were too scared or too tired to do." Maya swallowed her own grief, placed a hand on the woman's shoulder. "Then maybe," she said, "we can do it together." The woman nodded. Behind them, Lily's laugh rang out a bright sound in the night, echoing off trees and brick and bone. And in that moment, Maya didn't feel alone. Not in her fight, not in her family, not in her future. Later, as the crowd thinned and the last of the candles burned low, Richard reached for her hand. "Come home," he said. She looked at him, brows raised. "We're already here." The sky was dark with rain when the call came. Maya had just tucked Ethan in his stuffed bear curled beneath one arm, his mouth slightly open in sleep. She lingered by the doorway for a moment longer than usual, watching him breathe, then quietly made her way down the hall. Richard was in the study, reading through updates from the DA's office when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice raspy, aged, and weighed with something heavy. "You don't know me," the man said. "But I knew your cousin." Maya's pulse ticked upward. "Who is this?" "I can't say over the phone." "Not yet. But I was there. At Southport. I was one of the drivers. I saw what happened the night Darius disappeared." She gripped the edge of the wall. "I've been carrying this too long," he continued. "And I saw your vigil. I saw what you said. It's time someone else speaks." Maya's voice was low, steady. "Where are you?" "An old motel off Route 13. I'll text you the address. Come alone." She hesitated. "No police?" "I'll bolt. I don't want immunity. I just want this out of me before I go." Click. The call ended. Richard looked up as she walked into the study, face pale. "I need to go," she said. He stood instantly. "You're not going alone." He said. "I don't care," Richard cut in. "You've carried this whole thing alone long enough. Let me carry the risk this time." They drove out of the city under a sky the color of gunmetal, wipers beating in steady rhythm. The motel sat just outside an abandoned industrial zone, neon sign flickering. Windows shaded with old curtains. "Room 12. Maya knocked. The man who opened the door looked older than his year's gray stubble, hunched shoulders, trembling fingers, but his eyes were sharp. "You brought him," he said, nodding to Richard. "He's why I have a voice now," Maya replied. The man gestured them in. He didn't introduce himself, just pointed to the worn armchair in the corner and sat across from them. "I was a fixer. Back in '06, I worked logistics for jobs your father didn't want traced," he said, looking at Richard. "Southport was one of them. Big renovation deal on paper. But it was really a drop site. Money, people, tools, and things we weren't supposed to ask about." He looked at Maya. "Your cousin was smart, too smart. He figured out there was a side operation, off-books labor, unregulated contracts, even a trafficking loop run through another firm." Maya's stomach churned. Darius found a binder one night, schedules, payoffs, names. He confronted one of the foremen. Didn't realize how deep it ran. "The next night, we got a call," Felix said. "Take him for a ride." The man's voice broke slightly. "I thought, scare him a little, drop him far away. But when we stopped at the river, I realized they didn't want him scared. They wanted him gone. Silence filled the room. They made me hold him down, the man whispered. I didn't, he fought. He begged. And then, he looked away. I didn't kill him. But I let it happen. I watched. And then I drove back. Richard's fists were clenched, jaw tight. Maya sat frozen, her heart pounding in her ears. I don't want forgiveness, the man said. But I've written everything down. Names, times, details. It's in this envelope. He handed her a thick, weathered packet. I'm dying, he said simply. Lungs. Ain't got long. And I didn't want to die with his name in my throat. Maya stood slowly. Why now? She asked, voice shaking. Because you looked like his blood, the man said. When you spoke, you didn't just ask for justice. You demanded truth. And that's the first time I saw someone mean it. They left in silence. Back in the car, Maya held the envelope in her lap like it might shatter. Richard reached over, covering her hand. This is it. This is the final piece. No, she said softly. This is the beginning of the end. That night, Maya and Richard delivered the packet to the district attorney in person. Within hours, the DA's office filed a motion to reopen the case as a homicide investigation. News broke before dawn. New confession in cold case linked to Evans Corp legacy. Missing worker's family may finally get justice. The motel witness agreed to testify in front of a grand jury. Charges were being considered against multiple former associates of Charles Evans, including Felix, whose last known address had already been flagged by federal authorities. Maya didn't cry. Not yet, but when Ethan asked her at breakfast why she looked so tired, she simply said, because we're almost at the truth, baby. And the truth is heavy sometimes. Richard stood behind her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. In her heart, something long buried stirred, not grief, not rage, but closure, finally rising to the surface. It was spring again. The trees in the park had begun to bloom, soft pinks and whites fluttering like shy confessions in the wind. Children laughed in the distance. A man with a saxophone played low and slow under the old elm tree, where a new bench now sat beneath the bronze plaque bearing Darius's name. Maya sat there, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a dark green dress, simple pearls, and her natural curls pinned up loosely. The wind tugged gently at her hem. Around her, chairs were being set up. A small podium had been placed in the grass, surrounded by flower arrangements, and a standing banner that read, "In memory and action, justice for the forgotten." This wasn't a vigil. This was a reckoning turned legacy. The grand jury had returned indictments. Felix had been arrested trying to leave the country. Others had flipped. The DA promised full prosecution. And though Charles Evans had passed years ago, the record now bore his sins not as whispers, but as documented history. Today's event wasn't just for Darius. It was for all the names Maya had never known but carried anyway. She watched as Lily ran ahead with Ethan, holding hands. They danced around the base of the tree like it was a maypole, their laughter rising like birdsong. Carla arrived next, holding 2 steaming cups. You'd think with all your fame now, they'd give you better coffee. Maya smiled. I'm just glad they let me speak. No, you earned more than a mic, honey, Carla said, placing the cup beside her. You earned a seat at every table you walk into now. Maya looked across the park. Richard stood near the edge, deep in conversation with the mayor. He'd grown softer in the past few months, not weaker, but warmer. The armor had shed. The myth had become a man. When his eyes found Maya's, he smiled, genuine, quiet, just for her. And she smiled back. Later, as the crowd gathered, Maya stood at the podium. This time she wasn't nervous. She was rooted. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice carrying with ease. It's strange how much power silence has. How it can stretch across years, across generations. How it can tell you to forget someone you love, simply because speaking their name makes other people uncomfortable. She paused, meeting the eyes of those in front of her. But silence didn't win here. She unfolded a page. This is the part where I'm supposed to list the accomplishments of Darius James Williams. But there's no resume. No awards. Just memory. He made the best grilled cheese sandwiches. He knew every lyric to 90 Seconds hip-hop. He once gave a whole speech at Thanksgiving about why sweet potatoes deserved their own holiday. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. He was mine, and they took him. But they didn't take him away, because I refused to let them. She held up the folder now sealed, labeled, and part of the official city record. This goes in the archives, not as a statistic, not as a redacted file, but as truth. For Darius, for Tyrell, for every name we don't know yet, because remembering is resistance, and justice is the slow bloom of light beneath the weight of history. Applause swelled, not thunderous, but respectful, grounded. When she stepped down, Richard was there to meet her. "You were brilliant," he said. I was honest. That's what brilliance is," he replied, offering his arm. She took it. They walked together toward the bench beneath the tree. Lily and Ethan were waiting with a surprise, a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Justice Lady." Maya laughed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You know," she said, sitting down, "I used to think justice was a courtroom, a gavel, a sentence." Richard looked at her. "And now?" She smiled, eyes on the children. "Now I know justice is a promise, that we'll remember, that we'll speak, that we'll never let the forgotten stay buried." He nodded. "And us?" he asked. "Where do we go now?" She leaned her head on his shoulder, soft and certain. "We build," she said. "Not for show, not for headlines, but for them, for us, for what comes next." That night, Maya sat by the window, watching rain tap against the glass. Ethan was asleep, Lily too. The house was quiet. She picked up her cousin's old note, creased and yellowed, and pressed it against her heart. "You're not late anymore, Darius," she whispered. "You made it. We all did." Outside, the garden glowed, soft lanterns swaying, petals dancing on the wind. And inside, for the first time in years, Maya felt whole. This story reminds us that justice isn't always loud or immediate. It often lives in quiet, persistent hearts that refuse to forget. Maya's journey teaches us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, deserves light. It shows that courage doesn't always wear a badge or carry a title sometimes. It's a single mother who chooses to speak, to remember, and to stand. In a world that often erases the voiceless, this story proves that memory is power, and that healing begins when silence is broken.